Ready for the best summer ever? ID Tech is the original and most trusted tech camp for kids, ages 7 to 17, offering over 50 epic courses like Camp Crunch Labs IRL, BattleBots with take-home bots, AI and machine learning, and more. Camps are all about high-energy fun, new friends, trusted instructors, and exclusive tech partnerships. Experience ID Tech at 75 college campuses nationwide. Visit idtech.com and use code IDTech to save $150 on a week that's guaranteed to be the highlight of your kid's summer.
Quick question. Do people come to you for answers at work? Maybe you're managing projects, training new hires, or just the one everyone relies on. That's leadership. Through UVA Darden's part-time MBA in Roslyn, we help professionals like you turn real-world experience into recognized leadership credentials without stepping away from your career. Whether you work in healthcare, education, government, or business, this is how you take the next step. Learn more at darden.virginia.edu/PTMBA.
AI is transforming customer service. It's real and it works. And with Finn, we've built the #1 AI agent for customer service. We're seeing lots of cases where it's solving up to 90% of real queries for real businesses. This includes the real-world complex stuff like issuing a refund or cancelling an order. And we also see it when Finn goes up against competitors. It's top of all the performance benchmarks, top of the G2 leaderboard, and if you're not happy, we'll refund you up to $1 million, which I think says it all. Check it out for yourself at fin.ai.
Ready for the best summer ever? ID Tech is the original and most trusted tech camp for kids, ages 7 to 17, offering over 50 epic courses like Camp Crunch Labs IRL, BattleBots with take-home bots, AI and machine learning, and more. Camps are all about high-energy fun, new friends, trusted instructors, and exclusive tech partnerships. Experience ID Tech at 75 college campuses nationwide. Visit idtech.com and use code IDTech to save $150 on a week that's guaranteed to be the highlight of your kid's summer.
Hello, I'm Sarah and welcome to the Whispering Woods After Dark. We're going for a werewolf story today. I've done the vampires, now I'm on to the werewolves. This story I watched an episode about, I think it was Paranormal Witness or one of those programs. Oh, I wish they'd bring those back. I loved that show. I really did. Paranormal Witness or Haunted, I think Terror in the Woods, I really miss those. I used to love them and I've rewatched them several times. But this story is from an episode of one of those shows, so it may be familiar to you. I'll get into it now. Are you ready for this story? Late spring, central Maine. It's the kind of evening that lingers. Light still clings to the treetops, but the ground's already slipping into shadow. The air cooling just enough to notice. The smell of damp earth, grass, and wood settling in for the night. It was quiet out there. Not unusual, not at first. Palmyra is the sort of place where quiet is expected. A small town in Somerset County, where farmland breaks into woodland without warning, and houses sit far enough apart that you don't always see your neighbours for days at a time. The farmhouse stood back from the road, surrounded on all sides by trees, dense, unbroken. The kind of tree line that doesn't just mark the edge of the property, but feels like a boundary, something that separates one space from another. The family had been living there for some time by then, long enough for the routines to settle in, long enough for the unfamiliar to start feeling like home. It hadn't always felt that way. They had moved there during a difficult period, financial strain, the need to start again somewhere quieter, somewhere more manageable. The farmhouse offered space, privacy, distance from everything that had come before. And for a while, that was enough. But over time, things began to change. Not in any single dramatic way, just small things, the kind that are easy to dismiss, easy to explain, at least at first. It started with the lights, out in the woods. Not every night, not consistent, just appearing. Faint, sometimes distant enough to question whether they were really there at all. Other times, closer, clearer, moving between the trees in a way that didn't quite match anything familiar. They weren't headlights. There was no road out there, no reason for anyone to be walking through that part of the woods after dark. And yet, the lights appeared, then disappeared, without sound, without explanation. Around the same time, the dogs began to change. At first it was subtle, hesitating at the door, a reluctance to go outside once the sun dropped. Then something more noticeable, refusal, standing at the threshold, tense and watching, ears fixed toward the tree line, not barking or growling, just unwilling to move, as though something out there had already made itself known. The woods themselves began to feel different. That's how Shelley would later describe it. Not something you could point to, not something you could prove, but a shift. A sense that the space just beyond the property line was no longer empty, that it held something, watching, waiting. One afternoon, they went out into the trees, not far, just enough to look around, to try and make sense of the feeling that had been building over those weeks. That's when they found it. Depending on the version of the account, it was described in different ways. A nest, large and constructed, or a hole carefully dug. It was deliberate either way, and didn't belong. Not in the way a fallen branch belongs, not in the way animal tracks blend into the ground. This stood out, something made and shaped, and something that didn't fit with anything they recognised from the land around them. After that, the lights stopped, as suddenly as they begun. The woods returned to stillness. The dogs, however, did not. If anything, their behaviour became more pronounced, more urgent, more aware. Time passed, weeks turned into months. Life continued in the way it does, even when something feels slightly off. Routine fills in the gaps, normality pushes back against uncertainty. And for a while, whatever had unsettled them seemed to fade into the background. Until that evening. They were sitting outside on the porch, the air soft, the light beginning to fall. It was the kind of moment you don't think twice about. A pause at the end of the day, nothing unusual or remarkable, until the silence came. It wasn't gradual, it wasn't the slow quiet of the evening. It was immediate and complete, as if something had pressed down on the entire space around them and held it there. There was no sound of insects or birds, and no movement in the trees, just a stillness that was heavy and unnatural. They noticed it at the same time, that absence, that sudden, complete lack of sound, and then movement at the edge of the property. At first it was difficult to make out shapes between the trees, low to the ground, too far to define clearly, but close enough to see that something was there, more than one, and they were watching. The porch light cast just enough illumination to catch the reflection. Eyes, several pairs, held at a height that didn't quite match anything they expected. Not low like a fox, not moving like a deer, just fixed, level, staring. There is a moment in accounts like this where the ordinary world begins to slip, where recognition fails, where the brain tries quickly to place what it's seeing into something known and can't. This was that moment. Then one of the shapes moved slowly, not with the nervous darting motion of an animal, but deliberately and forward, just enough to step into the edge of the light. What Shelley would later describe is difficult to reconcile with anything familiar. The outline of a wolf, but larger, much larger. The body held differently, not fully on 4 legs, not entirely on 2, but shifting and adjusting, as if it could choose. Another shape followed, then another, more eyes, more movement. The sense, unmistakable now, that whatever stood at the edge of that property was not alone, and whatever it was coming closer. For a moment, neither of them moved. The shapes at the tree line held their position just beyond full clarity. Where the light faded into shadow and depth became difficult to judge, but the eyes remained fixed, reflecting back the porch light in a way that made them seem brighter than they should have been. Then one of them stepped forward again, closer now, close enough that the outline sharpened, not fully visible, but enough to understand that what they were looking at did not match anything they recognized. The body was wrong, too tall and upright. It moved forward on all 4s and then slowly shifted, rising, not suddenly or dramatically, but deliberately, as though adjusting its balance, as though it was used to doing it. That was the moment everything changed. The moment where curiosity dropped away and something else took its place. Instinct, the kind that doesn't need explanation. It tells you without hesitation that you need to get inside. They didn't run at first, but they moved quickly, back through the door, closing it behind them, locking it. The sound of the latch clicking into place, louder than it should have been in the silence. Inside, the house felt different immediately, smaller and contained. The outside world pressing against the walls in a way it hadn't before. They quickly turned off some of the lights, left others on, not wanting to draw attention, but not wanting to sit in darkness either. Every decision suddenly felt important. They moved to the windows, trying to look without being seen. The porch lights still spilled out across the yard. And there at the edge of it, movement. More than before. Not just one, several. The shapes shifting, repositioning, spreading out. Shelley would later describe the feeling as being watched. As if the thing out there understood exactly where they were, exactly what they were doing. One of the shapes came closer to the house, far closer than before, close enough that the details began to emerge in fragments. Fur, dark, uneven in the way the light caught it, the length of the limbs, the angle of the head, and the eyes, still fixed, still reflecting. It paused just outside the full reach of the porch light, and for a moment it stood. Not like an animal pausing mid-step, not like something startled, but upright and balanced. Behind it, others moved. Not chaotically, like a scattered group, but with a kind of coordination, circling themselves and positioning, always just far enough apart to remain separate, but close enough to remain connected. Inside the house, the air had changed. No one spoke at first. There was no need. Every movement was deliberate, measured and quiet. At some point, they tried to call for help, the phone in hand, the numbers dialed, explaining or trying to explain what they were seeing, what was outside, what they believed was happening, but the response, as later described, did not match the urgency they felt. There was no immediate arrival, no flashing lights cutting through the trees, no sense that anyone was coming. And outside, the movement continued. There were noises now, not too loud or consistent, footsteps in the grass, which were slow and heavy. At times, something brushing against the side of the house. At one point, something passed in front of the window. The shape blocked out what little light remained outside. For a second, only a second, the outline filled the glass, and then it moved on. Shelley would later say she could feel it, not physically, but as a pressure, as a presence. The sense that whatever was out there wasn't simply passing through, it was aware. Time stretched, minutes folding into something longer, the kind of time that doesn't move forward in a straight line. The family gathered in one room, away from the windows and doors, listening to every magnified sound. At some point, the idea of sleep disappeared completely. There was no question of it. Only waiting for something to change, for something to break the pattern, for morning to come. Outside, the movement never fully stopped. It circled, paused, resumed, always there, always close. And occasionally, those eyes would appear again, at the edge of the glass, at the edge of the light. There are moments in accounts like this where the fear changes shape, where it stops being sharp, stops being immediate, and becomes something slower, heavier, a realization that whatever is happening, it's not ending quickly. And this is not a passing encounter, not something that will simply move on. You are inside and something else is outside, and the only thing separating the two is a thin wall. At some point, the night stopped feeling like a sequence of hours. It became something else, with no clear beginning, no sense of how far they had come, only the awareness that it was still happening. The sounds outside shifted again, closer, not constant, but there was a rhythm to it. Movement, pause, movement again, as if whatever circled the house was taking its time. A low vibration passed through the floor at one point. It was barely there, but enough to be felt. Shelley would later describe it as a kind of rumble, not loud or sharp, but present in the ground itself, as though something with weight was moving just outside the walls. They stayed together, no one strayed far from the others. Even moving from one room to another felt like a risk. Every decision was slowed down and considered, measured against the possibility of drawing attention. At some point, they returned to the windows, just enough to look through, just enough to confirm what they already knew, that the yard was no longer empty. The shapes had moved closer again, nearer to the house than before, and they were clearer now, not fully visible, but enough to understand their scale. One stood near the edge of the porch light, half in shadow, half in that dim yellow glow, and again it shifted, rising. For a moment, it held its position, its outline unmistakably taller than anything they expected to see outside their home. The head angled slightly, as though listening, and then it dropped back down. Behind it, others moved, just continuing their slow, controlled movement around the house. There were other sounds now, not just movement, but something else which was low and indistinct. At times like a breath, at times like a distant vocalization that never fully formed into anything recognizable. At one point, something approached the side of the house again. It was closer this time. There was soft contact. It wasn't forceful, not an attempt to break in, but a presence against the wall. It was held there for a moment, and then it was gone. The windows became impossible to ignore. Even when they weren't looking at them, there was the constant awareness that something could be on the other side. Shelley would later describe one moment in particular, standing just far enough back from the glass to avoid being seen, and then a shape appearing suddenly. She described the eyes as level, not low to the ground or angled upward, but directly across, as if meeting her gaze, and then it moved, gone as quickly as it had appeared, leaving nothing but the reflection of the room behind her. After that, they stayed away from the windows completely. No more looking or checking. The family were just listening. There was no sense of what the creatures outside wanted, as there was no attempt to force entry or direct aggression. They were unrelenting, and that, more than anything else, seemed to settle in. The idea that whatever was out there was staying. Eventually, the darkness began to fade. The first sign was the faintest change in the colour of the windows, the black softening into something lighter, edges becoming visible again, shapes returning to the world outside. It was morning, and with it, change. The sounds had stopped. The movement had stopped. The presence had lifted, and the space around the house, so heavy through the night, began to feel empty again. Carefully, they approached the windows. The yard was still, the tree line unchanged. No shapes, no movement, no eyes reflecting back. Whatever had been there was gone. They didn't go outside immediately, even with daylight pushing through the windows. Even with the quiet restored, there was hesitation, a sense that stepping beyond the door might break whatever fragile distance had formed between them and the night before. When they did step out, they stepped out cautiously and slow. Eyes scanning the yard, the tree line, the spaces in between. At first, nothing stood out. The grass moved lightly in the morning air. The trees were still, and the world looked exactly as it should. But then, details began to emerge. Near the house, the ground looked disturbed. It wasn't torn up or damaged, but pressed, flattened in places where it hadn't been the day before. The dew told part of the story. Where the grass should have held moisture, there were patches where it had been displaced. Further out, closer to where the shapes had first appeared, there were impressions in the soil. The marks were not clearly defined, not clean enough to identify with certainty, but they were large, unusually so. Shelley would later describe them as not matching anything she recognised. Not a deer or coyote, not any animal she had seen on or around the property before. Some appeared elongated, others deeper, and in some areas, the spacing between them suggested something that had not moved in the typical four-legged pattern. There was no clear trail leading away, only scattered signs, and then nothing. The woods beyond that point were undisturbed, as if whatever had been there had simply stopped. or left in a way that left no trace. They searched for longer than they intended to, trying to make sense of what they were seeing, trying to connect it to something known, something explainable, but nothing fit. At some point they went back inside, with a growing certainty of something else, that whatever had happened was not something they wanted to experience again. The decision wasn't immediate, but it settled quickly. They began looking for somewhere else to live soon after, packing slowly, preparing quietly, not rushing, but not delaying either. The house, once a solution, had become something else, a place where something had come too close and stayed too long, and left behind just enough to make staying feel like a risk. And so they left. Across Maine and throughout the wider stretches of New England, there are accounts that carry a similar shape. They don't come from the same people, and they aren't tied to a single location, but the details are similar in a way that's difficult to ignore once you begin to notice them. People describe seeing something at the edge of the woodland, often where open land gives way to trees. It's usually late in the day or deep into the night when light is low and distance becomes harder to judge. What they see is described as canine in form, but larger than expected and held differently, as though it occupies the space in a way that doesn't quite match anything familiar. In some accounts, it appears briefly in headlights, caught in that narrow beam just long enough to register before it's gone again. In others, it's seen crossing fields or standing near the tree line, not moving with the quick reactive behaviour people associate with wildlife, but with something more measured. Most of these encounters don't last. They're over in seconds, sometimes in less time than it takes to fully process what's been seen. The figure is there, and then it isn't, leaving behind only the impression of something that didn't quite fit the environment. The Palmyra account is different because of that duration. It didn't pass through or disappear at the first sign of human presence. It remained, holding its position, moving around the house in a way that suggested awareness rather than instinct, and staying long enough for that initial uncertainty to give way to something more solid. Placed alongside those other reports, it begins to feel less like an isolated moment and more like a part of a wider pattern, something that appears in certain kinds of places, under certain conditions, and is only seen when it crosses just far enough into view. These are the quiet locations where distance and darkness work together to obscure detail, and where the boundary between open land and woodland creates a natural line of concealment. It's in those spaces that people tend to notice something out of place, something that doesn't belong to the landscape in the way everything else does. The descriptions are never exactly the same. Height varies, movement is remembered differently. The number of figures changes depending on the account, but the feeling that accompanies them is remarkably consistent. It's the sense of something being present just beyond where it should be, visible for a moment and then gone again, leaving no clear trace behind. And in that way, the story doesn't stay in one place. It moves quietly from one account to another.
ID Tech is more than just the original and most trusted tech camp for kids ages 7 to 17. ID Tech is where kids find their people, the engineering and creating people, the fire-breathing, shell-spinning BattleBots people, the just as happy building games as they are playing them people. ID Tech offers over 50 epic courses, like Camp Crunch Labs IRL, BattleBots with Take-Home Bots, and more at 75 college campuses across the country. Visit idtech.com and use code IDTech to save $150 on a week that's guaranteed to be the highlight of your kid's summer.
Quick question. Do people come to you for answers at work? Maybe you're managing projects, training new hires, or just the one everyone relies on. That's leadership. Through UVA Darden's part-time MBA in Roslyn, we help professionals like you turn real-world experience into recognized leadership credentials without stepping away from your career. Whether you work in healthcare, education, government, or business, this is how you take the next step. Learn more at darden.virginia.edu/PTMBA.
Now I'm going to be on the hunt for another story to go with this one, a pack of werewolves. Anybody's got any suggestions, let me know, because I really want to do another werewolf story. I'm right into the old kind of creatures, vampires, werewolves at the moment. Maybe I should reread Twilight. And I never actually watched the last film of Twilight. I think by the end I was just kind of done with it. But one day, you never know. It's curious, this story, because I do wonder what the kind of whole nest thing was, whether they came out because they disturbed the place where they were coming from. And I know in like Skinwalker Ranch and stuff like that, there's this kind of UFO type thing connected to werewolves, or the wolves that are out there, when they call them the Skinwalkers. And I do wonder if that hole had something to do with it, because that's when it all seemed to go wrong, once they stumbled across that. I would have moved out as well, I think. Mind you, they never actually came near the house. I think it was just a warning, like back off. Well, that's it from me today. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll catch you again on Monday for the Haunted episode. Take care, everyone.
Shopping at Burlington feels like a dream come true, and so do the prices.
Gorgeous. Wow. Beautiful.
That's really pretty.
Oh, hi. Sorry. I was just imagining all the places I could wear these dresses.
Oh, not a problem. You're just experiencing what it feels like to shop at Burlington. You just have to see it to believe it.
Should I?
Oh, yeah. You have to get that. And that. And this one, too. You know what? Fill up your cart.
At these prices, you can just get them all. Burlington. Deals. Brands. Wow.
With VerboCare, help is always ready. Before, during, and after your stay. We've planned for the plot twists, so support is always available. Because a great trip starts with peace of mind.
The stories told on the Whispering Woods are inspired by historical records, witness reports, and local folklore. While every effort is made to research and represent events accurately, some details, names, and locations may differ from official accounts or have been changed out of respect for those involved. These episodes are created for storytelling and entertainment purposes and should not be considered definitive fact or investigative journalism.